Are they just rock now, Arcade Fire? I mean,
Sometimes it's a bit folky, to be
yeah,
honest.
true.
Definitely a rock band for sure.
Definitely a rock band. Arcade Fire, back for the first time in 5 years since
Mm.
Everything Now dropped in 2017 with their new album We. And Dave, do we care about Arcade Fire in 2022?
Oh wow! Right off the bat,
Do you care
it,
about Arcade Fire?
do I care about? That's interesting because there's a lot of love for this album, broadly speaking. There's advanced reviews out. The band's confident in what they've created. Clearly, also they just capped off a somewhat surprise Coachella performance that got a lot of attention as well. And it seems like people, or at least certain people, are very eager for Arcade Fire to be back in the mix. Of course, previous winners of the Grammy for Album of the Year, and at one point or another, perhaps the biggest,
Oh
American
yeah,
rock band, I would say.
North American.
Yeah, North American rock band, and I guess people want that back. Do I personally want that back? I guess not. I don't have a lot of reverence for the classic Arcade Fire jams. However, this is definitely a lot better than Everything Now, which I listened to once, didn't like, and never revisited. Uh, we,
Yeah,
we is definitely an interesting album, and that definitely counts for something when a band's been around as long as Arcade Fire has.
you think about Arcade Fire in 2022, and I just want to say I care about Arcade Fire in 2022. I don't know if I hold them up on the same pedestal I did before Everything Now in this album. I do think this album is a good course correction for them, and definitely I'm impressed with parts of it. But the suburbs is just such a seminal record. It's just one of those records you look back and you're like, any band that makes this is a band that you should care about because if they can ever recapture that, you're gonna get a classic. And they haven't been able to quite recapture that. I think Reflector had moments, but what didn't get quite up to that. Everything Now, like you mentioned, this like foray into like disco influence sound that was trying to talk about the present moment of political, social, and
Right.
societal discourse just
Most
didn't really
overtly pop
work.
music, it's
Right.
definitely not what they used to make. I guess we is closer to their
Yes.
most heralded music at the very least.
But you mentioned those surprise shows, and they've had those surprise shows not only at Coachella, but I think they did a pop up one in New Orleans and one in New York City as well. So they've been doing this a little bit, and it just feels like they're kind of getting back to their roots on this. Definitely exploring and more relatable themes, I'd say, but also I think leaning back into the songwriting style that really worked for them. This like very conceptual idea. They break this up into chunks. It's Age of
Mm.
Anxiety 1 and 2, End of the Empire 1 through 3, and then 4. Like they're really trying to like go for something in terms of how they do this. And I don't know if it all really fits, but I think what they were trying to do is build these really grand, big sounding songs that build up, similar to what we just talked about Sharon Von Etten, that slow burn build up sound. And when it hits, it hits. I think things like their single "Lookout Kid" is just a really, really beautiful, wonderful song that's
Mm.
super reflective of Win Butler, and I really loved that one. I think there's a couple other tracks on here I really liked, and overall, I think this is a good step forward for Arcade Fire as one of these like godfathers of rock at this point, which is kind of strange to say, but I mean, with where Foo Fighters are at, the Killers are obviously the one who's touring and still huge and continuously doing stuff, but it feels like Arcade Fire is really in that like they're one of the tenants of rock at this point.
Yeah, yeah, which is it's kind of interesting too. If you go on Wikipedia and look at like the list of band members and past
Mm,
members, it's a long list of people that are no longer involved, including
it's a big band.
Will Butler, who is now leaving after being involved on this sixth album, We. And yeah, I think it's definitely a reestablishment that they're going to be around for a very long time still, at the very least. But yeah, I think there's just a lot of at least cool moments on all these songs, even if like, they some of these songs can be a bit meandering, but they're trying to achieve something with the concept, with the storytelling. So, I mean, it all makes sense to me. I thought Unconditional One, Lookout Kid, as you said, kind of has like a call and response feel with the lyrics, which I really enjoy, and I guess makes it a good fit for a single. But right off the bat, honestly, with the album Age of Anxiety 1, once there's that like switch up halfway through and you get this like electronic bass line showing up all of a sudden, I was like, wow, that's a this very specific choice. It kind of sets you up for the surprise that you can find on the production and instrumentation side of things throughout the rest of the album.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think Age of Anxiety 1 really stood out for the exact reason that you talked about. You get that uh bass kind of dropping in there, and then the synths come in, and then the background chorus starts singing in that really high pitched tone. It's like, oh, okay, so this is Arcade Fire here. This is where we're going with this. Yeah, I think that Age of Anxiety 1 and 2 I actually thought were both pretty good. Um, End of the Empire I thought was interesting. It's I think that that's a really like big swing because they're really reflecting on just like the state of I'm gonna assume American politics without them naming American politics and America just in general. And I couldn't quite place exactly what it reminded me of. Maybe a Connor Oberst type sound,
Oh wow, yeah,
like in terms of like how they were singing on that. But oh
eyes are
man,
bright.
yeah, Bright exactly. Bright Eyes sounding track. But I thought it was interesting and sounded nice, but it's more toned down than a lot of the other ones we've talked about. Any other moments that you liked on this or anything else?
I mean, don't they say specifically the end of the Great American Empire or
Oh, do
something?
they?
Or
Oh.
am I just conflating this with like the Taylor Swift song "Last Great American Dynasty" or whatever it is off of?
No,
I'm
you might
trying
be
to
right, I
remember.
think.
I don't know. I'm not sure, but yeah. I mean, I really enjoyed "End of Empire 4" just for my favorite lyric on the whole album. We unsubscribe. Fuck season 5. Awesome line.
Although I do have to say, if you unsubscribe from a lot of shows that far on, like Better Call Saul, you're missing out. So definitely be
Right.
watching some
Yeah.
shows, and
Yeah.
we'll tell you about those. So hit that subscribe button on Nostalgia Pod. But yeah, I mean, in general, a course correction, Arcade Fire finding themselves again, and you just love to see it. So hit that hit that follow on our Nostalgia Best 2022 playlist to stay tuned to the Arcade Fire jam that will be dropped on there.